stature with a soft-spoken feminine voice. Her questions have been at times seemingly naive, probing in the way an insistent child might, with why and how, the many whys and hows of Mexican society. And yet, Elena Poniatowska is not shy, demure. Her questions are relentlessly provocative. Her narrative packs a punch. The authorities must feel like they just stepped into the boxing ring unwittingly when her books are published. Those who hold the reins of society do not always readily get what Elena Poniatowska reveals. In 1954, she published her first creative work, Lidus Kikus. And the great writers like Carlos Fuentes and Juan Rulfo said, "Oh, look, how cute. Elena created a charming children's book. And oh my, look at the witches, brujas, and imaginary things that come out of this young woman's mind." The power of Elena's irony, of a skill that would mark all of her books, both fiction and nonfiction, for years to come, that between the lines, subtle, philosophical commentary, that way of handing the reins to the underdog of society to let them speak for themselves, that great talent went unrecognized in her first book, a series of 12 perfect and short portraits of a girl's coming of age in a society with entrenched, restrictive roles for women, for the poor, and for the disenfranchised. Elena's first job was writing for the Excelsior newspaper. They hired her because she brought them an interview with a visiting dignitary, but they relegated her to the collection of society tidbits. She vowed nonetheless to do an interview a day, to write an article a day, and through that strict writing habit, embarked on a path to become one of Mexico's greatest writers. Elena speaks for the voiceless, the Mexican without access to the word and to official history. At the newspaper, the only other female in the 1950s was one who wrote cutesy, alarming brief notes, who went by the nickname of Bambi. Elena was asked what nickname she might like to use, and she offered Dumbo. Either it didn't stick or they got it. Elena's name has always appeared above her writing. A name that made one irate interviewee accuse her of being nothing more than a Polish princess when he did not like the insistence of her probing wives. Elena is indeed of royal blood, inherited through a father whose family eschewed that heritage, choosing instead to immigrate to France and to defend freedom during the crisis moments leading to the Second World War. Her father met Elena's Mexican mother in Paris. They became volunteer ambulance drivers in 1940, but as the war heated up, Elena, her mother, and her younger sister were sent to Mexico to escape harm. Her father, a parachutist, was very involved in the war effort and only joined them years later. Elena arrived in Mexico in 1942 and has never left, except for a few months stint here and there. Elena Poniatowska, Amor, is Mexican. She speaks for Mexico and has been highly recognized since the 1970s, late 60s actually. Even those who are illiterate know who she is and what she writes about. They comment on what she publishes, seek her out at public gatherings, and thank her for imparting their voice, their story. Of some 50 books published, 2 of Elena's most recognized works are journalistic accounts. The first on the government massacre of hundreds of protesters at Tlatelolco Plaza in Mexico City on October 2nd, 1968. The second on the ineffectiveness of government bureaucracy following the massive earthquake in 1985. As in other parts of the world, protests broke out over government repression and incarceration of demonstrators, which had gone on for many years. In Mexico City, the protests began in the summer, but as the moment of the World Olympics approached, that were to commence on October 12th, knowing international attention would be focused focused on the city, university students and union workers announced a meeting in the public Tlatelolco Square. And the government was ready with snipers on the roofs of the apartment buildings, tanks to roll up to the exits, helicopters and foot soldiers ready to catch anyone who fled the plaza. Afterward, silence. The official word was that those university students, communist sympathizers, started shooting. That only a handful had died, the instigators jailed. None of this was true. Everyone knew that. But the Olympics went on as planned and the outside world forgot or did nothing. Elena Poniatowska had had a custom from years earlier of visiting the renowned Mexico City prison on Sundays when the families visited. She had met railroad worker union organizers there, rotting in jail since the 1950s. Now the guards let her in, thinking of her as simply another family member or an attractive young woman. Elena began to meet those who were lucky enough to have not been shot at Tlatelolco and were locked up indefinitely, or the mothers of those killed, seeking each visitor's day to learn of their child's fate. Elena began to collect their comments. 3 years later, she became the only writer until just recently to publish a book about Tlatelolco. Innovative in structure, she alternates official speak with the words of those jailed, the mothers of the disappeared, witnesses who remained in the shadows. Together with photos of the gruesome aftermath on the plaza, the book provides a testimony of the Mexican people. During the decade following Tlatelolco, Elena had worked to understand and interview a woman who would never be noticed by the society around her. An older, scruffy woman who scrubbed floors, who washed clothes in a drop-off laundromat. Elena saw in her a representative of Mexico's little-recognized soldier of the Mexican Revolution. Her novelized version of this story, Hasta no verte Jesús mío, translated to English, Here's to you, Jesusa, spoke for all Mexicans. The novel's language and the woman's experience was that of many people who sought work and a future in the Mexican capital, only to live life on the fringes of society following the victory of the Mexican Revolution. In 1985, the strongest earthquake in centuries shook Mexico City. Elena and her teenage children spent crucial ensuing days with many others among the rubble, moving rocks by bucket brigade, trying to help those trapped below several stories crumble to the ground. The comments of those involved, again alternated with official speak, formed her book Nada Nadie, translated to English, Nothing Nobody, the Voices from the Earthquake. Elena Poniatowska is considered to have invented the interview genre in Mexico. And is it little wonder? No one before her dared to go directly to the people, to sit in their jails and humble abodes, to fold clothes with them, carry rocks, and listen to their supplications. No one else has captured Mexico in the manner Elena has. Her early interviews of artistic and literary figures in their homes, the eyewitness testimony of government brutality, of those jailed in indefinite status, of the mothers of the disappeared, the discards of society, the rape of a 13-year-old girl who with her mother is subsequently verbally assaulted by the government that should have brought justice, a young woman living with cerebral palsy who fights for authorization to adopt a child, biographies of the gay artist Juan Soriano and of the eminent Octavio Paz, her narrative on the women of Tehuantepec, Oaxaca, to accompany exquisite photos of Graciela Iturbide, reveals an indigenous people who care little for Western observations as they continue their millennia-old customs. Elena's books are her construction, but they are not always her words, they are the words of the Mexican people. Since the 1990s, several of her books have been published in English translation. One that is highly recommended is her novelized version of Tina Modotti's life. Spent mostly in Mexico City, an artistic photographer, Modotti struggled with others for a more equitable society following the Mexican Revolution. Later, she volunteered in defense of the Spanish Republic. Finissima reveals as much about Mexico as about the life of Tina Modotti. Elena's novel, La piel del cielo, published in English translation as The Skin of the Sky, is loosely centered around the character of an astronomer. Elena's husband, Guillermo Aro, was an astronomer. She is now widowed. But this story is about science and Mexican bureaucracy during the 20th century and the lack of support for talented young artists. Reading Elena's books is not always easy. The historical commentary and myriad voices and reflections can take time and attention, but her books are necessary for understanding Mexico. She was labeled communist for preparing a book about Tina Modotti. Years later, the accolades drowned out the epithets as she published a novel about the economic heyday of shipping goods by train, interpreted through the eyes of the very railroad workers who were greatly mistreated by the ownership and jailed when they dared to go out on strike. Her most recent book takes on the fraudulent activities around the 2006 national elections and the passion of at least half the nation's support for Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Her awards are numerous, several journalistic and literary awards, including the Premio Mazatlan for her novel Hasta no verte, Jesús mío, and for Finísima, literary awards including Spain's Premio Alfaguara in 2001 for The Skin of the Sky, Mexico's annual prize in science and art in 2002, and this very year, the highest literary award of all Latin America, the Rómulo Gallegos Prize for her latest novel, El Tren Pasa Primero, The Train Arrives First, not yet in English translation, based on the 1950s and the railroad workers' strike. She is only the second woman to receive the prestigious Rómulo Gallegos, the Pulitzer Prize for Latin America. Elena Poniatowska may be short in stature, but she is relentless in spirit and research, resonant and powerful in word. It is a great honor to have her present today. Elena Poniatowska. Better here.
It's fine. Thank you. Well, I'm sorry I'm not going to give a conference on a speech on sexuality because I've forgotten what it's all about. I will. So, but anyway, I'll speak about the literature that rises from the streets. Do you love me? Yes, I do. How about you? I love you too. Human communication can be as easy as that. Only a few words are needed for a dialogue. You and I, a man and a woman can form a multitude. What else did Adam and Eve do? In 1968, the Mexican police hit the students who asked for a dialogue with the president, El Presidente Gustavo Díaz Ordaz. Here is your diabolo, they would say, because they could not even pronounce the word dialogue. Are words indispensable for the act of communication? Of course not. When the voice doesn't find its words, there is the language of the eyes, of hands, of our whole body. Love is usually a dialogue, and in the silence shared by two people who understand each other, the deepest complicity can be born. During the earthquakes of September 19th and 20th in 1985, the experts in seismology communicated with those buried under the rubble by knocking on the concrete floors and walls of the buildings turned into sandwiches, turned upside down, and thus started a dialogue between life and death. This is one of the stories. The U.S. team arrived at the Nuevo León building around 2 or 3 in the morning. They turned off all the machinery, cranes, and bulldozers, and placed a number of sensors throughout the ruins. The specialists asked for a patrol car, and through its bullhorn, spoke to the survivors. Attention, survivors of entrance C. as in Carlos, please knock 10 times. The sensors could detect, like in an electrocardiogram, the slightest sound. Attention, survivors of entrance D as in David, please knock 10 times. Later they were asked to knock 5 times, then 3, then again 10 times. It was late at night and very dark. The voice could be heard with clarity. Attention, survivors of entrance, C, B, D, E. We all were in a state of suspense. For 2.5 hours, the sensors made their markings on yards and more yards of paper. They contained very small signals. Many survivors were detected crushed between the walls of entrances C, D, E, and F. The North American technicians asked me to translate a message that I will never forget. Survivors, we know you are here. Do not despair. We are working and we will get you out. Jesus, everyone embraced each other crying. The U.S. team rescued 23 living persons in the areas where the sensors registered sounds. They gave instructions on how to excavate, where to make tunnels. They had experience just as the Swiss, the French, and the Israelis did. I witnessed how the French people helped to get 20 people out with the help of their dogs. From Truman Capote and his In Cold Blood, true stories have acquired the category of literature in the sense that they make as good reading as fiction. The commonplace that reality surpasses fiction includes writers that portray reality and become chronicles of what they see, hear, and feel. This is why Bernal Díaz del Castillo in the 16th century is such a good novelist when he writes about the Mexican conquest. This is why Carlos Monsiváis does not need novels to transmit his immense creative capacity and narrative talent. To uncover acts hidden from society is the function of a new kind of literature based on reality. It never bothered Truman Capote to be called a reporter or a non-fiction writer when he published In Cold Blood. Miguel Barnet, his Spanish translator, 1 year later, published in 1966 Biografía de un Cimarrón, the biography of a black slave, that proved that poor people are not defeated people. Perhaps one of the most shocking speeches is the one of Domitila de la Chungara, the wife of a Bolivian tin miner and mother of 7 children, who came to the International Women's Congress organized by the United Nations in Mexico. Domitila was denouncing the hunger in Bolivia and the situation of the miners when the president of the Mexican delegation, a woman, interrupted her. Look, Senora, let's speak of us as women. Look, Senora, forget for a moment the suffering of your people. Forget the massacres. We've talked enough about them. We have listened to you a lot. So now let us speak about us, about you, and about me as women. Domitila replied, very well, let us speak about the two of us. But if you allow me, I will begin. Senora, I have known you for a week. Each morning you arrive wearing a different outfit. However, I don't. I see you every day with a new dress and your hair done as though you had time to spare in an expensive beauty parlor. However, I don't. Every afternoon I see a driver in a car waiting for you at the door to take you home while I walk. And to present yourself here as you do, I am sure that you live in a really elegant house in a fancy neighborhood, a very fancy neighborhood, don't you? While we, the wives of the miners, have only a small place lent to us while our husbands work for the mine, and when they die or get sick or are fired, we have 90 days to look for another place, and then we are thrown into the street. Now, Senora, tell me, do you have something in common with my situation? Do I have anything in common with yours? What equality are we going to talk about, you and I? If you and I have nothing in common, if you and I are so different, we cannot be equals at this moment, even as women, don't you think? Those who do not have a voice are those who possess the most powerful voice because it is unknown, unlikely, imaginative, terrifying, unpredictable. A voice that has not been carved with a chisel by formalisms. A voice whose only modulation is the earth. No woman of my class has ever said to me what I have heard from Jesusa. Not one of them has given me what she gives, nor anyone with this dignity that the Spaniards call casta, la casta, breeding. Finally, I lie with her. She knows what no one can teach. Her wisdom is as essential as corn and rain. Jesusa never stood still and never rested. Relentless, she used to tell me, sit down, you're the one who's tired. And she stood up for hours at age 87. To be a soldier in the Mexican Revolution was to march with the troop, prepare the food, take part in campaigns. Jesusa, for example, gallops at the side of her husband, Pedro Aguilar, and while he fires, she loads the Mauser. When he dies, she is the one who fires. She gives us fulminating and unforgettable images of what combat signifies, fighting signifies. In Mexico, life isn't worth anything, and Pedro Aguilar falls off his horse without Jesusa noticing it. I still handed him the loaded Mauser, and he didn't take it. I turned my head to see that Pedro was no longer on his horse. Death is as simple as that. Jesusa never gives in, despite the harshness of her circumstances. Not even the book written about her life was a form of subjection. Jesusa, always blunt, warned me, you'll come and see me while you can get what you want out of me. After that, you won't be seen for dust. Someday you'll come and you won't find me. You'll only find the wind. This day will arrive, and when it comes, there will be no one to tell you what happened to me. And you will think that everything has been a lie. It's the truth. We are here living a lie. What they say on the radio are lies. The neighbors tell lies, and it's a lie that they will miss me. If I'm no longer of any use, what in the hell are they going to miss? Nor in the workshop. Who do you think will miss me if I'm not even going to say goodbye? While conditions of oppression, misery, and social exclusion exist in Latin America, a testimony, una historia oral, will be the only way in which the reader can become aware of unsuspected and different experiences. A reader very often hostile to learn the truth of this new reality. Since I became a journalist, I have always listened to voices. Where does a writer get his voices? I got them first in jail, then in the streets, then at the moment of an earthquake. Why under these circumstances? Because it is in extreme situations that people feel the urge to be with others. They suddenly have time for themselves and for others, and they speak out. In a way, they attempt a new communication with their fellow men or women. They improvise their conduct because barriers and prejudices have been demolished. In doing so, they acquire a torrent of new knowledge. For example, on the 19th of September earthquake, after the earthquakes, I stayed in the streets for 3 months and witnessed how Mexico City underwent one of the noblest transfers of power in its history, a power that greatly transcended the limits of mere solidarity, the transformation of the people into a government, and of official disorder into civilian order. Democracy can bring importance to individuals who were previously invisible. What do these voices say, and how are they linked to literature? These voices are not only linked to literature, but are literary. The following is the story of a biology professor during the time he participated in a university student brigade in September 1985. He says, "We arrived at the Social Security's baseball stadium, known as the Delta Park in Parque Delta, and just seeing it made me choke out. We unloaded our equipment, emptied the van, the formaldehyde, the dry ice, the spraying hoses and tanks. Then I looked at the stadium. It was as if we were in the middle of a play, at the center of a show, but with no spectators, no audience. All the seats up there were empty, but the field was brightly lit, and the actors were all there below on stage, but they were dead. Further back stood 3 huge plastic tents, also brightly illuminated by the field lights, with signs saying unidentified bodies. Another read identified bodies, and the third and last one said remains. Remains in plastic bags. There were limbs and other body parts that I never wanted to see, and thank God I never had to see. These small plastic bags were treated with the same care and respect given to the bags that contained full bodies. People were coming in to identify their remains. As a defense mechanism, I started to see myself as a spectator who was watching a movie. The smell of formaldehyde was very strong. At the entrance, you could hear the clatter of the clerks as they typed death certificates. From the vans, they brought down bundles and more bundles and more bundles and more. There were bodies and more bodies. The first thing we did was to establish a line between which nobody could go without being fumigated. This was called the Sanitary Carpet. By this time, men, women, and children had been dead for 3 days, 4 days, and the process of putrefaction was advanced. We set down a roll of plastic on the ground to act as a barrier and as the spot where people would stand and be sprayed. The doctor ordered me, "Stop fumigating the corpses. Do it now." At a distance of some 20 yards, you could see the plastic bags, the dry ice, and the heaps. Those heaps, fully covered with plastic sheets, were bodies. The power hose was so strong that it blew off the plastic sheets. So I thought, I have to overcome my fear, because if I don't do this right, I could be spraying other workers and cause them a problem. Death is part of life. I must force myself to look. The first thing I saw was a tall girl lying on the ground, very fair. Her body was covered with bruises, totally naked. Her pubis had been shaved, and she had very large breasts, full of milk. The sign said, "Number 74, Gynecology, Obstetrics, Hospital Juarez." I noticed that she had a cut in the shape of a half moon on her womb, and it made me very sad to realize that she had just had her child. Her womb had not been barren. Her body was so pale that it looked like an abused statue. Well, why did you have to die? So I began a dialogue with the dead. I prayed and talked to myself while talking to them. I asked them why. I saw a fat woman with a very cheap cloth dress. I felt a great sense of shame. I told her out loud, I have no right to see you naked. I have no right to look at you. I saw dark, blackened bodies, and at a certain point, I began repeating to myself, these are nothing anymore. They're not human any longer. I repeated it to myself over and over, many times, as if to protect myself. This is only organic matter. These flattened arms, these tumefied faces, these protruding tongues, they're only organic matter. There's a lot of bacteria here, and I have to stop them from spreading. That's why I'm fumigating. I suddenly turned, and to my left, I saw a little girl with her eyes wide open in a smile that was like a broken grimace. An 8-year-old girl. Little girl, why didn't you run? Why did the beam fall on you? All the time, I kept talking to the bodies with an insistence that was filled with rage, anger, bitterness. It's not fair. It's not fair that in this country, hospitals, maternities, schools, government buildings, public offices collapse. It's not fair that it should always hit the poorest, the most deprived people. All the volunteers could feel the cold in their legs because of the dry ice and the smell of formaldehyde. Besides, we were scared. Maybe at first we were scared of being contaminated, but then we realized that we, the ones who were spraying, were the most protected ones. A very short, dark, skinny fellow came in. He was a typical Mexican who has had to work real hard, who probably lives in a tenement in some miserable slum. Damn, our people are so terribly unprotected. I mean, really, how forsaken they are. It really makes you angry to see them like that, so deprived. The boxes, he asked, the boxes. There were 3 coffins for him, the caskets, the coffins. He wanted to know if he had to pay for them. What could the poor boy possibly pay with? Have you identified your relatives? Yes. They're over there. But what about the boxes? No, the coffins are free. We'll give them to you right away. Did you come alone? He had come for his sister and 2 nieces. One was 14, the other 9 years old. While he went to get the bodies, I prepared the coffins and realized that one of them had 2 nails sticking out. But I said, too bad. It doesn't matter anyway. Later, I saw how the little guy was trying to flatten the nails with his tennis shoe. And when he wasn't able to do it, I saw him bending the nails with the board. And with that sole act, he gave back all human dimension to the bodies. I had thought that the only real thing were the bacteria. But for the skinny guy, even though his bodies were torn apart, they were still his skin, and they had the right not to be hurt by the nails. A fat guy helped him place the bodies in the coffins, and we had to sprinkle them with lime. We asked people for permission to do so. Would you allow us to sprinkle the body with lime? I asked the skinny little fellow, hey listen, will you let me sprinkle them with lime? Yes. We had to put a 14-year-old girl in an adult coffin because she didn't fit in the smaller one. And when I began to sprinkle the lime on her, I thought of Hamlet. It's really pathetic, Hamlet. At a certain point in the play, when Ophelia, after losing her mind, drowns, Hamlet's mother sprinkles violets on her body and says to herself, look, I come to put flowers on your body, the ones I should have placed on your wedding bed. I had exactly the same sensation. Girl, I am sprinkling limestone on you, little girl, so you go all white. but you'll be white because of the line. You didn't live a tall little 14-year-old girl, but because of the line you go all white. You know, with all these associations that we have about purity, dignity, and being untouched, all I could do was to sprinkle a little bit of limestone on her. Not a single flower, just a lot of white dust. And that's how she went. On October 2nd, 1968, according to the English newspaper The Guardian, more than 250 people were killed in the Plaza de las Tres Culturas, the Plaza of the Three Cultures in Tlatelolco. And the Mexican students' movement ended in a massacre 10 days before the beginning of the Olympic Games. For more than a year, I went to jail to interview students accused by the Mexican government of as many as 21 crimes. The age of the boys and girls that were imprisoned ranged from 17 to 27. I also spoke to government officials, teachers, librarians who were against the students' movement, but mostly to those who witnessed the killing on the evening of October 2nd. In massacre in Mexico, María del Carmen Rodríguez, student of Spanish literature at the Universidad Iberoamericana, Ibero-American University, said, she said about her boyfriend who was standing next to her, I suddenly saw him as I had never seen him before. I saw his very pale face, as white as snow, with blue veins, his little goatee that I had kept begging him not to shave off. Leave it, please leave it, because it made him look older than he really was, 21. I saw his deep-set blue eyes. They've always had a very sad look in them, and felt his warm body next to mine. Both of us were soaking wet from the rain and from having fallen into so many puddles every time we flung ourselves down on the ground during the shooting. Yet his arm felt nice and warm around my shoulders. Then for the first time since we've been going together, I told him yes. That when the army troops let us go, I'd live with him. That we were going to die someday, sooner or later, and that I wanted to live, that I was saying yes, 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 I loved you. I really loved you. I'll do whatever you want. I'm in love with you too. Yes, yes, I want to, yes. This paragraph bears a striking resemblance to another I'm sure you will recognize. I asked him with my eyes to ask again, yes, and then he asked me, would I yes to say yes, yes, my mountain flower? And first I put my arms around him, yes, and drew him down to me so he could feel my breasts, all perfume. Yes, and his heart was going like mad, and yes, I said, yes, I will, yes. It is part of Molly Bloom's final monologue, written by James Joyce in his Ulysses. A new political and social reality in Mexico took us by surprise on January 1st, 1994, nearly 14 years ago. This was the uprise of the Maya Indians in Chiapas. We had been told repeatedly by the Mexican government that we were entering into modernity, that NAFTA, the free trade agreement with NAFTA, was taking us out of the ranks of the third world countries, and converting us into a first world country. Our economy was extraordinary. We had to learn how to administer our riches, and suddenly, out of a cold blue sky, the Maya Indians in Chiapas, Mexico's most forgotten people, the smallest of the little people, reminded us that there still are more than 10 million Indians in Mexico who live exactly the way they did when Hernán Cortés set his foot on the new continent in 1519. The Mayans, who were the creators of the most powerful and astonishing culture in Mexico and Central America, the constructors of the pyramids of Yucatan, Palenque, Tikal, the astronomers that in the 4th and 5th centuries invented a calendar that was far more precise than the Gregorian used today, are now in the 21st century the forsaken among all other Mexicans, people who do not have water, nor tortillas, nor electricity, people who carry wood on their shoulders, people who collect rainwater, people who die of curable diseases. These Maya Indians, mostly peasants, mostly ill-fed, who do not know how to read or write, were led by one man who has now been sharing their lives' critical conditions in the jungle for more than 20 years. A university professor with a big nose and a pipe, who at first was mistaken for a priest. Subcomandante Marcos, whose name was discovered by the CIA. Rafael Guillén Vicente from the city of Tampico in the state of Tamaulipas. The north of Mexico found a way to communicate with the Indians and above all to make himself understood by the people of Chiapas. Subcomandante Marcos and his men called themselves Zapatistas because of Emiliano Zapata, the hero of the Mexican Revolution in 1910. Zapata asked for land and freedom, tierra y libertad, for the Mexican peasants. Subcomandante Marcos is forever handing over power to la sociedad civil, civil society, sympathizers who are willing to participate in Mexico's civic life. When ex-President Carlos Salinas de Gortari, declared that the government was willing to forgive the Zapatista Indians who had started war on January 1st, 1994, Subcomandante Marcos answered back, "Why should we ask for pardon? What are they to pardon us for? For not dying of hunger? For not being quiet about our misery? For not humbly accepting the gigantic historic burden of contempt and abandonment? For having taken up arms when all other ways were closed to us? For ignoring the penal code of Chiapas, the most absurd and repressive penal code in living memory? For having demonstrated to the rest of the country and the whole world that human dignity is alive and can be found in its poorest inhabitants? For having prepared ourselves when, before we began, for carrying guns into battle instead of bows and arrows? For having previously learned how to fight? For all of us being Mexicans? For most of us being Indians? For calling on Mexicans to fight in every way possible to defend what is theirs? For fighting for freedom, democracy, and justice? For not following the conduct of previous guerrilla groups or guerrilla groups? For not giving up? For not selling out? For not betraying each other? Who should ask for pardon and who is to grant it? Those who fill their pockets and their souls with declarations and promises, the dead, our dead, so mortally dead, of natural death, that is of measles, whooping cough, dengue, cholera, typhoid, mononucleosis, tetanus, pneumonia, malaria, and other gastrointestinal and pulmonary diseases, those who treat us like foreigners in our own land and ask us for obedience to a law of whose existence and justice we know nothing, those who tortured us, put us in jail, murdered us, and made us disappear for wanting a piece of land. Not a big one, just a piece of land on which we could produce something to fill our stomachs. Who should ask pardon and who is to grant it? Augusto Robastos, the novelist from Paraguay, used to say that when a book appears in our part of the world, it is as if it had been written by the people. He refers to Latin America because books weaver their voices, genealogies, legends, whispers, landscapes, secrets and customs as if we belong to the same huge country. This is precisely why it is so important to listen to the voices of the people. With the exception of the Argentines, who exterminated their Indian population in the mid-19th century, Latin America could be called Indian America. However, after 500 years of European domination, the minority still rules. To write in Latin America has a different meaning than it has in the United States or in Europe. I suppose that the same thing happens in Africa. Latin America invades, possesses, interferes, gets into the smallest cracks. Latin America is always out there, behind the window, watching, spying, ready to jump. The street enters through the door. People find their way in. They look at you while you are sleeping, eating, or making love. The path is public. In great American cities, everyone has something to do. People go somewhere. They walk quickly. They never turn their heads to look at their neighbors. In Latin America and Mexico, no one has anywhere to go. Thousands and thousands of people with nothing for themselves. Nothing, not a single opportunity. Their empty hands hang near their bodies, in front of their mouths, on top of their knees, their waiting hands without any use. All this human energy is there, wasted. They look, they wait, they fall asleep, they wait again. Nobody loves them and nobody misses them, and they are not needed anywhere. They are nobody. They do not exist. So much to do in the world, and there is no place for them. So much lost energy. There is no one to tell them, let's get up, let's get going, let's save, let's build. Outside my window, the multitude is always present, ready to burst in. Life is very resistant. People, the same cannon fodder that nourishes great universal misfortunes. Les condamnés de la terre, the wretched of the earth, as Franz Fanon called them. Suddenly, during an earthquake, one of them saves your life. We have no idea who he is or she is, what his or her name is. There is no way to thank them. They don't expect to be thanked. We never see them again, although they saved our lives. Jesús Apalancares, the hearing of Hasta no verte, Jesús mío, here's to you, Jesusa, thinks very little of herself. She says, I am like the gypsies, from nowhere. I don't feel Mexican and I don't recognize Mexicans. If I had money, I would be considered Mexican. But I am worse than dirt. I am nothing. That's right. That's right. That's what I am. Garbage for the dogs to pee on and keep on walking. The wind comes and blows it away, and that's the end of it. There's nothing else for me to be. I've never been worth anything. My whole life, I've been this same good-for-nothing germ you're looking at right now. Yet there is hope, because Mexicans have a powerful voice. Under the influence of the ceremony of the sacred mushrooms, which she had eaten in the mountains of Oaxaca, where she acted as a priestess, the Indian medicine woman Maria Sabina spoke the ancient voice of the earth and chanted while giving away the psilocybina, I don't know how you say it in English, which in Switzerland was transformed into LSD. Porque soy la mujer estrella Dios, la mujer estrella cruz, porque puedo nadar en lo grandioso, porque soy la mujer sabia en medicina, soy mujer piedra de sol sagrada, soy mujer que mira hacia adentro, soy la mujer Jesucristo, soy la mujer Jesucristo, soy la mujer Jesucristo, soy mujer que truena, soy mujer estrella grande, soy mujer estrella cruz, soy mujer de luz. Because I am the star god woman, because I can swim in infinity, because I am the wise medicine woman, I am the sacred stone sun woman, I am the woman who looks within, I am the Jesus Christ woman. I am the Jesus Christ woman. I am the Jesus Christ woman. I am the thunder woman. I am the cross and the star woman. I am the cross and the star woman. I am a woman of light. Thank you very much for listening.
Muchísimas gracias, Elena. We could probably take maybe 5 minutes for a few questions. If you want to project your voice and ask a question in English or Spanish, whatever you like. And if you would rather go outside and get in line for an autograph, go ahead. Yes, please, Yvonne. Project your voice, please.
Today you were asked a question about investigations into Tlatelolco, and you answered in Spanish, and I would love it if you would repeat it in English.
But I don't remember what I said.
So it was about what is the government or whoever's investigating.
Well, for instance, there's one thing I said. I remember I said that the President Luis Echeverría Álvarez, ex-president, he was under arrest within his house. He's too old to be taken to jail because he's nearly 90 years old or more. So he stays at his home, and then we still haven't discovered how many people were killed. That's more or less what I said.
What do you think about the immigration?
Well, I think that usually the Mexicans, they come here because of lack of opportunities in Mexico, because most of them, they leave their towns because they are hungry and they want to have a better life in the United States. And I remember a gardener I saw in Davis, California 20 years ago, and he didn't have, of course, his green card. He earned, I think, a lot of money, much more than he would earn in Mexico. And he used to hide every time there was a police car that came in the streets. So I asked him, why don't you go back to Mexico? Because to live like this and to be hiding all the time, to me, it would be hell, no? It's really, you're making a very difficult life for yourself, no? Hiding every time there's a patrol car. And he told me, well, I stay here because I would rather die here than in Mexico. So it's a very tragic answer, but it's a true answer.
What influence did Juan Rulfo and Octavio Paz have on your life when you were a younger writer?
Well, I really, the influence I had, I interviewed them many times. I used to applaud them all the time. But the influences of great writers, of great Mexican writers. Juan Rulfo was a difficult man, but Octavio Paz was also a difficult man, especially when he became older. But se puso de muy buen humor cuando se sacó el premio Nobel. Yes, he regained his good, but really, I think Octavio Paz was very keen on showing me, I wrote a book on him, and he was very keen on taking me to the Librairie Française, that was in El Paseo de la Reforma, and having me buy the books by André Breton. I wouldn't care. And then he wanted me to read all kinds of old princesses and countesses who were against the Russian communism. And I told him they were very dull and he didn't like it. But they were very dull. They were very well educated, but they were very dull.
I asked you this question about 8 years ago at North Carolina State University, so you filled in some details for me.
I did. I'm adding some details. I'm missing details.
No, you filled in some details. We
Yes.
spoke afterwards.
No, but I love Octavio Paz very much, and I love Rulfo perhaps more. No, but more or less the same. So you keep asking the same questions at all the conferences.
I will ask this question again in 7 years. I'm following your career.
Every 7 years. All right. Well, I'll wait for the next 7 years and wait for the question. By then I'll be 80. I'm 75. I'll be 82.
A question in back, Joan?
Who are your favorite writers alive today? Writing today?
My favorite writers alive today is first a woman from an extraordinary woman writer called Mercè Rodoreda, who's Catalana, who comes from Barcelona. She wrote a wonderful book about the Spanish Civil War without ever mentioning the Spanish Civil War, which is called La Plaza del Diamante. To me, she's a very important writer. And of course, I love the classical like Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Balzac. And I love, of course, Stendhal, the French writers. And I love, I've read also Henri Troyat, and I've read many American writers, like I like Susan Sontag, I like Nadine Gordimer, I like Joan Didion, who has a lot to do with California, and who else? And I like, there are many writers, Norman Mailer, of course, The Armies of the Night. Well, the list is enormous. I like the Bible.
Okay, anything else? All right.
Me.
Carolina.
Chicano writers, los escritores chicanos.
Chicano writers, I care for them a lot. We spoke about them this morning also, about Ana Castillo, Sherry Moraga, Sandra Cisneros, The House on Mango Street. And to me they're a surprise, because I think that language should be well written. It's not that they write badly, but for instance in Spanish they say, for example, esta puente mi espalda. When you say no, it's not this bridge called my back, no? It's not, puente is a masculine, is masculino, it's este puente, so they get mad at you and they tell you, no, everything has to be my way. I don't want to, you're not going to trample my style. So their style is, they're so self-assertive, so sure of themselves that they write the way they want. And this, of course, you can admire, no? I admire it because I'm capable of doing so.
I read that you went to high school in the United States.
Yes, that's where I learned English.
Why did you go to high school here?
Because because after the war, my mother had another boy, my brother, and we didn't fit into the house, and she had and we behaved very badly, my sister and I. I mean, we were always fighting, so she sent us to pray in the town. To pray for our sins, and then because she thought we would get a very good education, but it was a nun's education. Well, I was taught how to pray, but that was all. I wasn't taught logic or philosophy or mathematics or anything that's useful in life. I was taught that the spoon comes here, the knife comes here, and you should eat like that. You shouldn't lean like that. and to pray all day. But I've stopped praying many years ago because I married an astronomer who didn't believe in God.
Okay, listos?
I love to hear you speak spontaneously. You have so much spirit and life and, originality.
You give me the spirit and the life. I don't have it when I'm all by myself in my room, no.
Let's stay here. What would, there's so many young people in the room, what would be your advice to the young people today? If you could distill the wisdom of your whole life, I know that's asking a lot. What would you say?
But I would tell young people, I would probably tell them to love each other, to have love affairs, to make love. But they probably don't need to be told. Probably useless.
A question from Laura? Oh, from someone in front of Laura. No?
It's not a question, it's a comment. I read Hasta no verte Jesús mío when I was like 14, 15 years old. And I really like it so much. You have been a great influence to me. And I wanted to know more about the history of Mexico, the history of the Mexican Revolution so much that as I didn't know at that time, but as a result I became a history teacher.
Oh, good.
This is the book that in English translation is called Here's to You, Jesusa, and is about the woman, as I called her, the scruffy older woman who was washing clothes, who was not only the widow of a soldier in the revolution, but a soldier herself. Okay, well, we will move outside where you can join the line, but thank you again, Elena.